The cabin was supposed to be empty, a rotting shell buried in the Montana snow. But when Silas Harper, a former Marine, pried open the warped wooden door with his German Shepherd Ranger at his heels, he froze. From beneath the floor came a faint, choked sob. He ripped back the floorboards, and there in the darkness of a secret cellar, two twin girls huddled, their clothes torn, clutching a wooden box as if it were alive. Carved into the lid with a trembling hand were the words that chilled him to the bone. "Please protect my girls." The wind clawed at the mountain slope as if it wanted to peel the earth bare. Montana in late January had no mercy. The snow came sideways, whipped into a frenzy, stinging like shards of glass against exposed skin. White pines bent beneath the storm, their branches groaning, while the sky hung low, swollen with more snow yet to fall. On a winding trail that barely deserved the name of a road, a man trudged forward, his boots sinking deep into drifts that swallowed sound. His breath came in ragged clouds, visible in the air before the storm shredded it away. His coat, an olive green military surplus jacket with frayed cuffs, was dusted white, and his face bore the quiet endurance of a man who had weathered storms much harsher than this. Silas Harper, former Marine, 38 years old, shoulders square though not as broad as they once had been, a faint limp in his left leg that worsened when the cold sank deep into the bones. His face carried the kind of weathering that came not from age alone but from memory, faint scars on his cheek from shrapnel, crow's feet earned too early from nights awake under desert stars, eyes trained to stay alert even in sleep. His hair was cropped close, dark brown streaked prematurely with gray. Beside him padded a figure, just as resolute though, on four legs instead of two. Ranger, a 5-year-old German Shepherd, moved with the silent confidence of a creature bred for loyalty and vigilance. His black and tan coat was thick and glistened against the snow, his ears pricked forward, his nose twitching as he tested the storm for scents. Unlike his master, he didn't flinch at the cold. He welcomed it, bounding forward, then circling back, his breath rising in plumes from his muzzle. Silas had driven as far as his old truck would take him before the engine coughed and gave out under the frozen strain. Now, with daylight fading and the storm growing teeth, he searched for shelter. He had heard rumors in the town below, whispers of a hunting cabin long abandoned somewhere on this ridge. Through the swirling curtain of snow it appeared at last, a dark shape crouched among skeletal trees, half buried in drifts. The cabin leaned slightly to one side, its roof sagging under the weight of decades and storms. Windows, what remained of them, were patched with boards. The place looked less like shelter and more like a grave marker for a time gone by. Still, Silas knew the truth all Marines know. When the world narrows to survival, you take what is given. He pushed forward, boots crunching against ice. Ranger darted ahead, bounding toward the door, tail stiff as a flagpole. Silas followed, pressing a hand against the warped wood, feeling its chill through his glove. It gave way with a groan, hinges protesting as if waking from a long sleep. The smell that poured out was thick with dust and rot mildew from years of neglect, faint smoke stains lingering from fires long gone. Silas stepped inside, his shadow stretching across warped floorboards. The wind shrieked through gaps in the walls, carrying flakes of snow inside like unwanted guests. He set his rucksack down with a thump. Ranger padded in behind him, nails clicking on the wood. For a moment, there was only the sound of the storm battering the walls. Then something else, faint, fragile, almost lost beneath the moan of the wind. A sound that did not belong in an abandoned place. Ranger heard it first. His ears twitched. A low growl rumbled in his chest. He padded to the far corner of the room, nose pressed against a patch of uneven flooring. Silas stiffened, his hand instinctively brushing the pocket where a folding knife rested. He crouched, pressing his palm against the wood. There it was again, thin, broken, carried upward like smoke. A sob. Silas froze, every nerve sharpened. The storm outside faded in his awareness. There was only that sound, bleeding through the cracks of the floor. A child's sob. "Easy, boy," he muttered, though his own pulse had quickened. Ranger pawed at the boards, whining now, urgency replacing suspicion. Silas set his jaw. With practiced hands, he gripped the loose plank, pried it upward, the wood shrieking in protest. Another board came up, and another. Cold, stale air rushed upward, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of frightened breathing. A cellar, hidden beneath. He pulled back, letting Ranger peer first. The dog's nose quivered, ears upright, body taut, not with aggression, but with alertness. Silas leaned down, his voice low, steady, the same tone he had used to coax frightened civilians from bunkers overseas. "Hello? It's all right. You're safe now." At first, only silence answered him. Then as his eyes adjusted to the darkness below, he saw movement, two small figures huddled together in the far corner of the cellar. Thin arms wrapped around each other, trembling. Their dresses, once pink, were now dulled with grime and torn at the hem. Their hair, blonde and tangled, clung to their faces in matted strands. Twin girls, no older than 8. Their eyes caught the faint light leaking from above, wide and wet. One of them clutched something against her chest, a wooden box scarred with age, its surface etched with letters that caught Silas's eye even from a distance. A name, a woman's name. On the lid, a strip of paper, yellowed with time, fluttered in the draft. Faded ink formed shaky words, almost too faint to read. "If anyone finds this, please, save my children." Silas felt his throat constrict. Ranger whined, taking a cautious step toward the opening, tail lowered, posture soft, as if to tell the children he meant no harm. The twins did not speak. But the way they clutched each other, the way their eyes begged silently, carved deeper into Silas's chest than any battlefield scar. He exhaled, a vow already forming in his bones. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. And in that moment, the abandoned cabin ceased to be a ruin. It had become a battlefield of a different kind, one that demanded not weapons, but the courage to face a truth buried in snow and silence. The storm had quieted by dawn, leaving the mountain wrapped in a hush as fragile as glass. Icicles dripped from the eaves of the cabin, each drop echoing in the stillness like a clock counting down. Inside, Silas Harper crouched beside the cellar opening, his breath misting in the pale morning light. The two girls had not moved far from the shadows. Emily's small hands clutched the wooden box tight against her chest, while Grace leaned into her sister, eyes hollowed by hunger and sleepless nights. Ranger kept pacing, circling them with the patience of a sentinel, tail low but ears sharp. Every few moments he glanced at Silas as if to say, "They're fragile. Handle them gently." Silas extended a hand, not to touch, but to show them the calloused palm of a man who meant no harm. His voice was quiet, the same low timbre he used in the field when coaxing frightened civilians from rubble. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." Emily's lips trembled. Her eyes darted to the box she held and then back to him. She whispered, almost inaudible, "Mama said, only trust someone who feels real." The words sank deep into Silas. Feels real. He wondered how many false smiles these children had already endured. The moment was fragile, almost breaking into trust, until the crunch of footsteps outside shattered it. Ranger's head whipped toward the door. His growl was low, guttural, vibrating through the floorboards. The door creaked open, spilling white light into the dim cabin. A man stepped in, brushing snow from a heavy wool coat. He was tall, late 40s perhaps, broad-shouldered but with the slight stoop of someone too used to bending rules. His hair, dark with streaks of gray, was slicked back in a style that felt rehearsed, and his mustache framed a mouth too ready to smile. "Well now," the man said, voice warm, almost cheerful. "What a relief. You found them." The girls shrank back instantly. Grace hid her face in Emily's shoulder. Ranger barked once, sharp and commanding, the sound reverberating off the cabin walls. Silas rose to his full height, posture straight though his leg throbbed. His voice was measured. "Who are you?" The man spread his arms as if presenting himself. "Raymond Foster, their uncle. My poor nieces. I've been searching everywhere since the storm cut the road. Thank heavens you came across them." His eyes flicked to the wooden box Emily held, and just as quickly he masked the glance with another smile. But Silas noticed. Marines are trained to read the battlefield, and nothing about this man's body language rang true. Raymond stepped further inside, his boots leaving melting prints across the warped floor. He spoke gently, too gently, as if performing for an audience. The girls have been through such loss. Their parents, God rest their souls, left them in my care. This cabin was our refuge when the blizzard closed in. I only stepped out to fetch firewood. Imagine my horror when I returned and found strangers tearing up the floor. Emily pressed her face against the wooden box. Her knuckles whitened as she clung to it. Mama said, "Only real," she whispered again. Ranger moved closer to the children, planting himself between them and Raymond, hackles rising. His growl was steady now, a warning drumbeat. Silas kept his gaze locked on the man. Raymond's coat was expensive but stained at the cuffs, as though worn hard on the road. Around his neck hung a chain with a key, the kind that might open more than just doors. His hand kept drifting toward it unconsciously, fingers tapping against the metal as though to remind himself of control. "Uncle, huh?" Silas said evenly. "Funny, they didn't mention you." Raymond's smile didn't falter, but his eyes cooled, steel beneath sugar. Children grieve strangely. They forget, they fear, but I assure you, I am their blood. He extended a hand toward Emily, palm up, as if expecting her to come forward. She only tightened her hold on the box. Something flickered in Raymond's eyes then, a spark of irritation too quick to hide. He withdrew the hand and turned back toward Silas with exaggerated patience. "You don't know what these hills are like in winter. Strangers freeze, families survive. And family," he stressed, "always takes care of its own." The cabin seemed smaller now, crowded by the weight of his words. The storm outside had left silence, but in that silence every creak of wood, every drip of water from the icicles felt like a countdown. Silas stepped subtly closer to the girls, his boots firm against the boards. "If you're a family," he said, "you won't mind proving it." Raymond chuckled, but it sounded forced, brittle around the edges. His fingers clenched tighter around the chain at his neck. "Of course, in time. Right now the girls need warmth and food, not interrogation." Ranger barked again, startling him, the deep thunder of an animal unwilling to yield. The girls flinched but did not cry. They seemed to understand the dog was not warning them, but warning him. For the briefest moment, Raymond's polished mask cracked. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flicked toward the cellar opening, toward the very place he had left the children. Cold calculation replaced the faint warmth. Then, as swiftly as it appeared, the mask slid back into place. "Perhaps," he said smoothly, "we should head down the mountain together." No sense staying in this wreck, Silas did not move. The weight of Emily's whisper lingered in the air. "Only trust someone who feels real." And in Raymond's too-perfect smile, in the nervous way his hand clutched the key around his neck, Silas could feel the lie. The fire in the old stove had burned to embers, painting the cabin's warped beams in faint orange. Outside, the storm had calmed, leaving a heavy silence that pressed against the walls. Silas Harper sat near the cellar opening, the twins huddled close beside him. Ranger lay stretched across the doorway, a sentinel of fur and muscle, his eyes never leaving the man who still claimed to be their uncle, Raymond Foster. Raymond leaned back in a wooden chair, the shadows sharpening the angles of his face. He fiddled with the chain at his neck, letting the key clink softly against the buttons of his coat. The sound grated on Silas, like the tick of a bomb he couldn't yet defuse. Emily clutched the wooden box tighter than ever, her small arms trembling from both cold and something deeper. Fear. At last, with a courage that seemed to surprise even herself, she pushed the box toward Silas. Her whisper carried the weight of a dying wish. "Mama said, it's for someone true." Silas accepted it gently, his calloused fingers brushing the worn lid. The grain of the wood was cracked and faded, but carved into it were letters Margaret Hayes, etched in uneven strokes. With careful precision, he lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded letter, the edges browned with age, as though time itself had tried to erase it. He unfolded the brittle paper. The handwriting wavered, rushed yet deliberate, each line bearing the strain of someone who knew her time was running out. To whomever finds this, my name is Margaret Hayes. I am dying. My daughters, Emily and Grace, must be saved. Raymond Foster is not family. He is a vulture. He wants this land and will not hesitate to use my children to claim it. Please, if you are kind, if you are just, protect them. Place them in hands worthy of their trust. This mountain was my home, but it should not be their prison. The words blurred for a moment as Silas felt the sting behind his eyes. He inhaled sharply, folding the letter back as if to preserve its fragile authority. Raymond shifted, his smile tight as wire. A woman's rambling in her final hours, he said smoothly. Surely you wouldn't place more weight on her paranoia than on the word of a living guardian. Silas rose, holding the letter. His frame filled the space between Raymond and the girls. This isn't paranoia. It's clarity. She saw through you, Raymond's mask faltered. His eyes narrowed, jaw tightening. But before he could speak, Grace whimpered softly, holding her hand to a shallow cut on her palm. She must have scraped it against the cellar stairs. Ranger was at her side instantly, lowering his head and licking the wound with gentle insistence. Grace's breathing steadied, the child leaning into his warmth. The dog's quiet loyalty said more than any oath could. The sight tore at Silas. For a moment, the cabin melted away, and he was back in another life. A sterile airport terminal, his own daughter, little Clara, standing with pigtails and wide eyes as he left for deployment. He had promised her he'd be home soon. Just a few months, he'd said. But war had stretched those months into years, until she no longer reached for his hand when he returned. The regret pressed heavy against his chest. He had missed bedtime stories, birthdays, the simple miracle of being there. Looking into Emily and Grace's eyes now, he felt the weight of what abandonment carved into a child's heart. Raymond stood abruptly, chair scraping harshly against the wood. Enough of this theater. The law will recognize my claim. That land belongs to me. His hand tightened on the key at his neck, his voice dropping to a hiss. And so do the girls. Ranger's growl vibrated like thunder. Silas's hand rested lightly on the dog's collar, but his gaze never left Raymond. This letter, Silas said evenly, is more than a plea. It's evidence. And I'll make sure it finds the right hands. The girls pressed closer to him, their trust unspoken but clear. For the first time, Emily's tiny hand reached for his sleeve, anchoring herself to him. Raymond's smile returned, but this time it was thin, brittle, edged with menace. Then I suppose we'll see who makes it down the mountain first. The air grew heavy again, charged not with the storm outside, but with the promise of a storm yet to break within these walls. The mountain had fallen into a muffled silence, broken only by the whistle of wind curling around the cabin's corners. Inside, the air was brittle, the kind of tension that made every board creak louder, every flicker of firelight sharper. Silas Harper stood near the girls, the wooden letter still folded in his pocket. Across the room, Raymond Foster's mask of civility finally cracked. His voice, once syrupy, came out low and jagged. No one is taking this land from me. He lunged toward the door, slamming the heavy latch into place. The iron bolt clattered home with finality. The cabin was sealed, snow pressing against the walls like a second prison. Emily gasped, clutching Grace close, and Ranger's hackles shot up. The dog's bark split the silence like a thunderclap. Raymond's eyes gleamed in the half-light, his hand gripping a hunting knife he had pulled from his coat pocket. His smile twisted. That box belongs to me. The land, the timber, everything on this mountain, it's mine. Silas squared his stance, his injured leg protesting, but his body steady as a wall. His voice was calm, honed from years of command. Step back, Raymond. This ends with you walking away, not with children bleeding. But Raymond wasn't listening. He lunged toward Emily, his hand outstretched for the box. Before Silas could move, Ranger hurled himself between them, a blur of black and tan. The German shepherd's teeth clamped down on Raymond's sleeve, dragging his arm sideways. The knife clattered to the floor, spinning across the boards. Raymond cursed, staggering back. The struggle jolted the room. A candle set on the edge of the cellar toppled, its flame kissing a rag of cloth left nearby. At first it was only a flicker, But then the dry timber hungrily caught. Orange tongues crawled up the wall, releasing a hiss of smoke. Grace coughed, her small body racked by fear. Emily wrapped both arms around her sister, pressing her close. Though no older than 8, her face hardened with determination. "I won't let him take you," she whispered fiercely, as if she were the elder guardian. Her small body became a shield, frail but unyielding. The cabin groaned as the storm outside pressed harder, wind funneling through the cracks, feeding the fire with oxygen. Snow beat against the shuttered windows, rattling them in their frames, while the flames began to roar in counterpoint. It was as if the storm and the fire were in competition who would devour the cabin first. Silas moved quickly, his instincts snapping into place. He shoved a chair between Raymond and the girls, buying precious seconds. "Ranger, guard!" he barked. The dog obeyed instantly, planting himself in front of the twins, growling deep and steady, every muscle taut. Raymond's face was a portrait of desperation now, sweat beading along his brow despite the cold. He looked less like an uncle and more like a man possessed, cornered by his own lies. His voice rose above the fire's crackle, frantic. "You don't understand. That land, it's the last thing I have. Without it, I'm nothing." "Then you should have earned it honestly," Silas shot back, his eyes locked on the man. "Not by chaining children in the dark." The fire leapt higher, sparks snapping like gunfire. Smoke thickened, clawing at throats and eyes. Grace wheezed, her small lungs fighting for air. Silas yanked his jacket off, pressing it over the girls as a makeshift shield. For a heartbeat, time froze Raymond on one side, wild-eyed, the children huddled beneath Emily's trembling arms, Ranger snarling like a storm-given flesh, and Silas standing between them all, scarred and steady. Then the beams above cracked with a sound like breaking bones. Flames spilled along the rafters. The cabin was becoming a coffin. Silas knew there would be no reasoning now, only survival. The cabin burned itself into ruin by morning, nothing but smoldering timbers under a sky scrubbed clean by the storm. Silas Harper stood with the twins wrapped in blankets, Ranger pressed against their legs like a pillar of warmth. Smoke curled skyward, carrying with it the final traces of Raymond Foster's obsession. By the time officers from the county sheriff's department arrived, 2 patrol trucks cutting tracks through the snow. The letter had already been placed in Silas's hands like a sacred trust. Sheriff Cole was the first to step out, a broad man in his 50s with a thick gray beard and steady eyes, his presence radiating the no-nonsense calm of someone who had seen too many mountain tragedies. He listened in silence as Silas recounted the night, his hand resting on the girl's shoulders with a gentleness that contrasted his rugged frame. The deputies sifted through the wreckage. Among the debris, they recovered Raymond, injured but alive, coughing black smoke. His face was pale with fury rather than pain. As he was cuffed and loaded into the truck, he spat words sharp as icicles. "That land was mine." Sheriff Cole silenced him with a glare. "What you took was innocence, and that weighs heavier than land." At the station in the valley town below, Margaret Hayes's letter was entered into evidence. Its trembling script became the voice she could not raise in life. Combined with the testimony of Silas and the condition of the twins, it sealed Raymond's fate. Charges of child endangerment, fraud, and attempted unlawful seizure of property. For Emily and Grace, the nightmare was over. Silas never imagined himself filling the role of a father again, but the state entrusted him with temporary guardianship. The paperwork was quick, but the weight of the responsibility sank deep into him. He caught himself one evening, staring at the girls as they slept in the back of his borrowed truck, thinking, "I left one daughter behind to war. Maybe this is my chance to not fail again." Weeks later, under gentler skies, Silas found a small cottage at the edge of the valley. Its paint peeled in places, but sunlight pooled in its windows, and a wide stretch of garden opened out back. Ranger claimed it instantly, running the fence line with triumphant barks. The twins followed, their giggles breaking through months of silence. In the garden's corner, Silas knelt with them. Together they pressed a sapling into the soil, a white rose bush, chosen because Margaret's letter had ended with a simple request. "Plant white roses for me, so my daughters remember love." Emily scooped soil with her small hands, her nails still faintly rimmed with soot. Grace patted it down, humming softly. Silas watered the roots, his rough hands trembling as though he were touching something far more fragile than a plant. The cottage soon filled with life. Crayon drawings appeared on the fridge. Stick figures of two girls, a big man with a scarred face, and a large German shepherd with ears too big. In one drawing, the house itself grinned, sunlight pouring from its windows. Grace shyly explained, "It's smiling 'cause it's our home now." Neighbors trickled in over the weeks. One of them, Mrs. Donovan, a retired school teacher with silver hair pinned in a neat bun, often brought warm bread. She noticed how Emily hovered protectively near Grace and gently encouraged both girls into laughter with card games and stories of her own childhood. Her presence was a reminder. Healing didn't come only from guardians, but from community. Silas worked the land around the cottage, splitting wood, mending fences, building shelves in the kitchen. The scars on his hands ached, but the ache felt different. It wasn't battle anymore, it was building. Some evenings he found himself watching the sunset with the girls beside him. Ranger sprawled at their feet. Emily would lean her head against his arm, Grace sketching flowers in a notebook. And one afternoon, Emily presented him with a picture, a small cottage under a wide sun, two girls holding hands with a tall man, and a dog standing proud at their side. At the top she had written in careful letters, "Our new family." Silas stared at it for a long time. Then he pulled both girls into his arms, his voice low but steady. "This is home now. And I'm not leaving." The white roses bloomed slowly in the garden, their petals bright against the dark soil, their fragrance sweet in the morning air. To Silas, they were more than flowers. They were a promise kept, a reminder that even in the coldest storms, love had roots strong enough to grow again. In the end, this story is not only about a soldier, two fragile sisters, and a loyal dog. It is about how love can rise again even from ashes, and how the smallest voices can carry the greatest truth. Some may call it courage, others may call it faith, but I believe it is nothing less than a miracle that God places in the hearts of those willing to listen. If you believe that miracles still happen when we choose love over greed, then share your amen in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from so we know how far this message of hope travels. And if this story touched you, please like this video, follow and subscribe to the channel. Together we can keep telling stories that remind us that no storm is stronger than love.